When I was a small child, I can remember watching scary shows on TV. And at the scary parts, I would hide behind my eyes like this. And my dad, who was watching with me, would say, "Remember, Jane, how we sometimes play pretend like? This is just pretend like." And for some reason, I could not say pretend, but I would say, "It's ten like, it's ten like." And I would open my eyes back up. And that small childhood phrase sometimes still comes back to me when I'm frightened or overwhelmed by scary stories that I read or see on TV or in a movie. It's just pen-like, and I can deal with that. I titled this sermon, Return of the Living Dead, simply because I'm challenging myself to have all my sermons on R-related words this fall, and that's the scary movie that starts with an R. It's a good one to use as an example as well. It's the first zombie movie where the zombies ate brains, and it was caused by a chemical spill. And we're all sensitive to chemicals and viruses getting out and destroying people, aren't we? I heard Stephen King share in an interview with Stephen Colbert that many folks have told him during this pandemic that they felt like they were living in one of his novels. He agreed that our times do resonate with his novel The Stand, which was published in 1978. The plot centers on a deadly pandemic of weaponized influenza and its aftermath, in which humans gather into factions that are each led by personification of either good or evil and seem fated to clash with each other. The Crazies is another movie that reminds you of today, I think. It's tried to watch it. I watched part of it. That's all I could get through. Why do we read, though, these scary books and watch these scary movies like these? When I see those sharks coming up in the shallow waters when I'm walking on the beach at St. Simon's, I hear bum, 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 bum. Some of these things stay with you. So what gives? Why do many of us go out of our way and even pay good money to consume frightening entertainment? Here's what the experts have to say. This is according to an article published in October 2020 in Explore Health. Reason number one, being scared can give you a thrilling rush. Even though horror movies are fake, watching them can trigger a very real fight or flight response, some experts say. Clinical psychologist Dr. Krista Jordan said, the brain doesn't always distinguish between fantasy and reality completely effectively. For example, get someone to describe biting into a lemon. And if the person is really good at describing it, your salivary glands will activate. According to Jordan, the same sort of glitch can happen when we're watching horror. The brain kind of forgets in that moment that what it's seeing is not real danger and then charges up the physiological response that would be appropriate if it were. In turn, your body goes into fight or flight mode, which means it's flooded with adrenaline and euphoria-inducing brain chemicals like endorphins and dopamine, all of which can pump you up and make you feel like you're ready to take on the world. You're terrified, but you're also safe. It's just tin-like. Dr. Jeffrey Gadir, a clinical psychologist based in New York, stated, despite the absence of any real threat, many people still feel a sense of accomplishment when they finish a horror movie. You feel like, I dealt with something that was outside of my comfort zone. I conquered it. That gives you confidence. Reason number two, it helps you prepare for the worst. Horror movies give you a glimpse at how life-threatening situations might play out, which can make you feel more prepared for actual danger. It's about trying to learn to predict the world around you, according to Colton Schroeder, a PhD candidate in the Department of Comparative Human Development at the University of Chicago. What do other people do, even if they're fictional, when in this kind of situation? What do other people do when they find themselves facing some particular kind of threat or challenge? Psychologist Jeffrey Goodyear is a zombie movie fan, zombie movies. He said that by watching shows like The Walking Dead, he can approximate what might happen if his worst nightmare becomes a reality. And it's not just zombies he's taking notes on. He says, as a psychologist, I watch a show like The Walking Dead to see how people behave in a zombie apocalypse because they become the true monsters. The zombies are nothing more than window dressing. And reason number 3, horror teaches you how to cope. In addition to giving you a playbook of sorts, experts say watching horror movies can help you practice coping strategies. Scrivener says, I think people who watch them a lot are learning how to deal with uncertainty and suspense and anxiety. He recently co-authored a study that shows horror movie fans are more resilient and less psychologically distressed than non-horror fans in the face of today's COVID-19 pandemic, likely because of their well-honed coping skills. We think what's going on is that horror fans are essentially building a toolkit for how to deal with these feelings of being anxious or afraid, says Scrivener, because that's exactly what we do when we're watching a horror movie. You regulate your emotions so that you're in a sweet spot for feeling afraid, but also having fun. Reason number 4, lets you explore your dark side. Dr. Erin Hadley, PhD, a clinical psychologist in Philadelphia, states, we all have unknowable parts of ourselves that I think are kind of externalized into dangers outside of us. One reason we may be drawn to horror, she posits, is it allows us to explore those taboo parts of ourselves. With a movie like Carrie, for example, a lot of people identify with her being bullied and tormented at school and at home. But do you then root for her to slaughter her classmates? This psychologist says, I think a lot of people do. Identifying with the perpetrator is a classically Freudian interpretation of why we like horror, adds Jordan. It's the same reason Freud would say that we like to watch boxing. We're not identifying with the person getting hit. We're identifying with the person beating the crap out of the other guy. I think a lot of people would struggle to admit that. But truth be told, I think that's probably going on at some level, says that psychologist. And then Jung, of course, would connect all of these monsters with our archetypes. And here are some health benefits we get from watching scary movies. These are from an article published in the December 2020 issue of Starburst magazine. First, horror movies can burn calories. Nope, a list of horror movies isn't an alternative to a regular workout in the gym. However, one 90-minute movie with scary scenes can burn 100 to 200 calories. It's equal to a small chocolate bar. Second, it can improve brain activity. Several scientific studies found that frightening scenes in horror movies help increase the adrenaline level and release neurotransmitters in the brain. When watching horror films, people not only look at their monitors, most people analyze everything that's happening on the screens, trying to find a possible solution and think about what they would do in the same situation. Working that brain. Third, they stimulate the release of helpful hormones. It's a well-known fact that the frightening scenes in movies are a real adrenaline pump. However, most people don't realize that when the scary scenes are over, the brain calms down and releases serotonin and dopamine. Those hormones help keep your body healthy and maintain a high level of brain activity. Are there negative consequences of reading and watching horror? Yes, for some. There are some who have developed PTSD symptoms, especially if they're later in similar situations to that presented in the story. And there are others who have developed something called cinematic neurosis, defined as the development of anxiety, somatic responses, disassociation, and even psychotic symptoms after watching a film. The Exorcist became a public concern due to many cases of traumatic neurosis by affecting viewers psychiatrically. Most would agree, however, that reading and watching horror stories can be very cathartic. Negative feelings created by horror movies and stories actually intensify the positive feeling when the hero triumphs in the end. They survived. We survived. And in these weird pandemic days, we need to feel like we can survive. Again, from Colbert's interview with Stephen King, King summarized it this way. I think people do gravitate towards horror stories when times are tough. And times are really tough, certainly through this now, because when you go to a horror story, like If It Bleeds or Gerald's Game or any of that stuff I've written, and you read it, and the situations are even more horrible than being under house arrest with no toilet paper, well, when you finish, you can close the book, and you've had a place to put your fears for a little while. You've been able to say, these problems are much worse than my problems. And then you close the book, and you can go to bed and sleep like a baby. At least that's the theory, end quote. I don't know about that, Stephen. But the bottom line is, most of us can feel free to enjoy our horror stories and movies. After all, it's just 10-like, isn't it? Well, I don't think I want to leave this message with Stephen King's voice in my ears. So here is a Mary Oliver poem that relates. It's called In Blackwater Woods. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the pond. And every pond, no matter what its name, is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this, the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Amen, and blessed be.